The US, the UK and France supported a 9-month extension of the mandate allowing aid deliveries from Turkey to northwest Syria through the Bab al-Hawa border crossing. But Russia voted against that and China abstained. Instead, Moscow, supported by Beijing, proposed a 6-month extension and called for a Secretary General report on the humanitarian effect of unilateral Western sanctions on Syria.
Those against?
But now it was the US, UK and France who objected.
2 votes in favour, 3 votes against, and 10 abstentions.
It was a surprise. Just minutes before, the US had said the crossing point was essential for millions of people in need in northwest Syria. The US ambassador blamed Russia for the border crossing's closure.
The Russians have been bullies on this. The Syrian people want this assistance. I think the Assad regime wants this assistance, and they're going to have to stand up and call for it.
The Russians and the Chinese had argued that the principle of the UN Security Council governing aid shipments to Syria should be phased out in favor of Syrian sovereignty, and said that it was hypocritical to express concern over the plight of those in areas beyond Syrian government control in the northwest without also addressing the humanitarian impact of unilateral Western sanctions on the 11 million in the rest of Syria who rely on international aid. And the Syrian government agreed.
Those who spoke about life and death need to lift sanctions instead of crying about Syrians.
The Russians said they would not support a rollover of the previous mandate while a new agreement is worked out, but did suggest the Syrians could reopen Bab al-Hawa themselves, as they have 2 other border crossings without UN Security Council intervention.
By rewarding them with either 12 or 9 months, they're getting nothing instead, absolutely nothing. I mean, that's an empty shell.
Do you think Syria will now, add Bab al-Hawa to the other 2 crossings?
That is for them to decide. I think that they may not, but now it's in their hands.
Nonetheless, the Swiss, who along with the Brazilians are overseeing the UN Security Council deliberations on the reopening of the Bab al-Hawa crossing, say they remain confident that those discussions will continue. The mandate for UN aid deliveries through the crossing expired on Monday. Shia Bertansi, Al Jazeera, the United Nations.
Well, journalist Noor Kormosh is at the Bab al-Hawa crossing along the Syria-Turkey border.
The failure to extend and renew the Bab al-Hawa border crossing has left millions who are currently living in the refugee camps in a state of shock and disappointment, actually, at the UN and the Security Council, as they were somehow in a little bit glimpse of hope that they will consider the latest loss that the people here in the refugee camps and in the community have endured after the latest catastrophic earthquakes that struck the region. Of course, the absence of UN delivered aid will have dire humanitarian consequences on the already worsening humanitarian situation here in northwestern Syria, as 2 million people are currently living in the refugee camps and are living off the monthly food baskets that are being provided by the food program in the UN. Of course, the NGOs are also going to suffer the consequences of this decision, as 100% of their fund depends on the UN aid coming through the Bab al-Hawa. And of course, local humanitarian activists condemned this decision and described it as politicizing the humanitarian sector, in which will affect the lives of millions who are currently living in the refugee camps and are living off the food baskets and the health sector that is being provided to the hospitals will be severely affected in the area.
Muaz Mustafa works on advocacy and humanitarian initiatives in Syria, and he says continuous votes on aid deliveries to these rebel-held territories are unnecessary and harmful to Syrians.
Every few months, we have the international community consensus by all the other members of the Security Council, minus China, for example, that abstained after the veto by Russia today. Everyone agrees that the humanitarian aid that the international community through the United Nations is allocating for the Syrians, over 4 million in northwest Syria, We give concessions in order for Russia and the Assad regime to allow another 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 3 months to open the border. And that is completely unnecessary. The fact is that the United Nations does not need a Security Council resolution simply to provide specifically humanitarian aid. And the fact that we are allowing Russia and the Assad regime and to enter the politics of the UN on this and have the same people that besiege and bombard these populations be in charge of saying, okay, you can send aid across or not. Over border points, by the way, they do not control in areas that they have no presence is really appalling. What's really important about al-Bab al-Hawa border crossing, it's the main border crossing that has been traditionally even allowed to be used by the Russia and the Assad regime for the UN aid to enter. Bab al-Hawa is that main artery, and it goes directly to Idlib province, a province where you have millions of people, including major cities and towns and other things that are in desperate need for this aid, many of them internally displaced in ad hoc camps with no access to international bodies to support them. That's why this aid is so important. It's for millions of people, the majority of which are children and obviously civilians.